I want you to picture a girl in quite literally the prettiest department store in all of Spain crying over shoes hysterically. Not because I couldn't afford them, not because they didn't fit, but because a friend's mom had offered to buy them for me. And something in me when she did this absolutely spiraled. The emotional side of me fully took over, and logic was out the window. My thoughts were that I didn't need her help. I didn't want her help. I didn't want generosity. I didn't want anything that made me feel vulnerable or dependent or that I owed someone back something. I did not want to be a burden. And in that moment, in that dressing room, there were two versions of me sitting there. The immersion, the emotional girl who was spiraling, panicking, and feeling totally weak, and the logical observer who was watching, standing outside of it and saying, something is really wrong here. This isn't normal, and we need to figure out why. And that observer was right. What I realized sitting there crying over the shoes in this dressing room was that a version of me that had saved me as a child was now absolutely suffocating me as an adult. And it was time to kill her. Not destroy her, not hate her, not reject the part that kept me alive, but actually acknowledge that the girl who saved me was now the girl holding me back. Here's what I want to know, and I want you to ask yourself. What version of you showed up to keep you safe that's now keeping you stuck? Hey, everybody, it's Maria, and welcome back to Get In You Are Driving, the podcast where I help you find agency in a discouraging world while reminding you that you are always in the driver's seat. And today, we're talking about something that I've been processing for a couple years now, which is killing the versions of yourself that saved you but are now suffocating you. So, here's who this episode is for and the overall agenda. All right, you're the person who, let's say, confuses safety with isolation, or you're the person who was praised for always being together, or for being strong, or for being independent, right? That eldest daughter syndrome, perhaps. Maybe you're the eldest son, but somewhere along the way, that became your entire identity, your protection, and essentially your prison. Or maybe you're the person who carries a quiet belief that you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not worthy, you're not lovable. And that story follows you into every room, every conversation, every relationship, and it whispers that you don't belong. Or maybe you're like me, and you probably are, that you have a lot of these voices and a lot of different stories. But really, this episode is for anyone who knows a past version of themselves is no longer aiding them. Anyone who can feel that they're outgrowing something, whether that is a belief, a protective mechanism, a version of who they thought they had to be, and you have no idea how to actually move through that. Here's what we're doing today. We're going to look at the Victoria Beckham documentary, one of the episodes that was called Kill the Wag, which is a concept I really liked. And it got me deeply thinking about what it actually means to outgrow an identity that no longer serves you. I'm going to be sharing two versions of myself that I have worked very hard to kill, especially this last year. And those two versions are the incompetent Maria and the hyper independent Maria. Because these versions that protected me, yeah, but now they absolutely need to die. Now, like I said, I think we all have several versions of these things. And I think this is a continual process to go through and work through in life. But these are the two I want to focus on today and share with you because I've really done the work on them and I'm pretty much on the other side of it now. So I think I can really be honest about what my experience was. And then I'm going to give you my 5-step process that I took that helped me kind of make a map for this and identify what version is holding you back and how to evolve without destroying yourself in the process. Because the goal is to move you from survival mode into individuation, which just means becoming who you actually are and not who you had to be to survive in your past. And by the end of this, you're going to understand something really important, which is a version that saved you as a child is suffocating you as an adult, and that's not betrayal, that's not failure, it's just evolution, and that's what changes everything. All right, so Victoria Beckham documentary. It was a couple months ago. Me and my cousin were hanging out. We had nothing to do. It was raining, and we're like, you know what? Let's watch the new documentary. It just came out because we were both curious, and she's somebody that I've always kind of been relatively curious about, just the whole family in general. And at this point, when this episode comes out, I'm sure everybody will know about the scandal that's going on with the son, but that's a whole different thing. Interesting. So anyways, the second episode of her documentary, I believe it's 3, is called Kill the Wag. And this name really launched itself into my brain. But first, I had to look up wag. And in British slang, wag means wife or girlfriend of a famous athlete. And despite Victoria Beckham being a Spice Girl, she had this whole era where that label of wag was her entire identity. And she was basically defined by who she was married to, right? David Beckham, this wonderful soccer player. And her entire public persona revolved around being married to him, right? Being the famous man's woman. Oops, sorry, somebody's sending me a message. How dare they? Now, to grow into who she actually wanted to be, because she really wanted to be a fashion designer, she literally had to kill the wag. She didn't necessarily explain this phenomenon. It's the guy who chooses to give her a chance. Can't remember his name at the time. He really went into it super well, and he wanted to essentially kind of make her his project because he believed in her. And he talked a lot about the psychology of killing this old version of yourself that is just no longer helping you, and essentially how you had to stop seeing yourself that way, and you have to start seeing yourself differently because that's how you change. And I remember sitting there watching it, and something in me was like, wait, this is something I'm going through right now. This is like the phenomenon, and they are putting cinema to it. They're putting words to it. And again, I realized that this is what I had been processing. This is what I was going through. And yeah, Victoria Beckham had to kill the wag to become a fashion designer, and I had to kill these 2 versions of myself to become who I wanted to be. And I'm going to do the story of both of these versions and where they started, because I think you really need to understand the why of this story you're telling yourself came from and the where. So the first story is the incompetent Maria. Wow. Let's just say I grew up in a family where I think the type of intelligence that was very valued was linear thinking, logical, textbook, the kind of brain that really thrives on traditional schooling. Great. Those people are amazing. I was just not that brain. School never made sense to me. I never liked school. I never shined academically. I'm as average as they came. I hated standardized tests. I still remember my ACT score that's burned into my brain. I will still not tell you what I actually got. And yeah, I was kind of really the only creative person in my family. I think my dad is a bit creative, but he didn't know how to tap into that. So yeah, and because our current system still, even now, mostly values this one kind of intelligence and very much so treats it like a virtue when you're going through school, I internalized something very early, which was I was stupid. Now, that sounds dramatic, but it really wasn't. I wasn't also either sitting around thinking all the time, I'm dumb. It was more quieter than that, but it was also very much so alive, and it was very much so a fact in my mind. Like, oh, I'm not smart. That's just true about me. And this story, when I tell you this internal narrative, followed me everywhere, especially when I got older. Job interviews, conversations where I felt I couldn't contribute, relationships, basically any space where I felt like I had to prove my worth, I was like, oh, I can't say anything. And I always felt this sensation that everybody knew something that I didn't know. I can give you one concrete example actually that happened a month ago, and I'm 26 now. I was playing a game, and the game had to do with numbers and rolling dice. And you had to be aware of that as you were playing the game. And because I'm not good at numbers, I said a number, passed the dice on to the next person, and the other person was like, "That's impossible. You can't get that number." And I remember being like, oh my gosh, math is following me into my life. And I remember in that moment, I wasn't super embarrassed. I was still somewhat embarrassed, but it took me back to all those moments of feeling stupid. But because I have really worked on it this year, I was fine. But it still can some ways creep itself into my life, right? Because that person, they didn't say it rudely, but they're like, "That's impossible. You can't get that number." And I genuinely was like, "Huh? What do you mean?" So that's just one story and one example of the thousands of moments my life has made me feel that way. Now, this was following me. And the thing is, because I felt like I wasn't smart and I internalized this, what did I have to offer? Like, that was the question going on in my head. Like, well, then I don't have anything to offer, right? Like, it just felt like I was carrying an invisible weight, always kind of waiting maybe for somebody to figure out Maria doesn't belong here. Like, what is she doing? And the moment something really shifted for me, I don't think was super random, but maybe a little random. It was at this storytelling event that I still frequent, and the theme was lies. And at this time, I didn't know anyone at the event. I was just going and listening and watching. And I remember thinking for this event, because they email you 2 weeks prior telling you what the theme is going to be, so that if you do want to tell a story, you're ready. I was like, I'm going to tell this story about this. And I walked up there, again, it was all strangers, and I said, starting out, my first line was, because I prepared myself, I said, the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves, and mine was that I was stupid. And I remember when I said it out loud, like I really said it out loud, it felt really good. But it did also feel scary because I definitely could tell that there were some people in the audience that were like, what? You know, probably the people that are just naturally like very academically smart, but I was like, oh wow, I'm speaking to the people like me. And anyways, I looked at them, but I thought, you know what, it doesn't matter because I knew for myself that I was naming and I had now become aware of a massive issue in my life that had been controlling me for so long. And I feel like sharing the story was part of like getting rid of this. So after that night, slowly things began to change. I really started asking myself, what am I actually afraid of? Where did this come from? And then I think this is the most important part. I really started exposing myself to those fears, but not all at once, in tiny steps and in micro doses. And I'm still doing that. I really am still doing that. It's an ongoing process because something that you've carried for 25 years doesn't magically go away in 2 months. But the biggest thing that I needed to stop doing, because this was now my fault, was I needed to stop comparing myself to the engineers of my family. Love my family. I'm not an engineer. They are. My job was never to become them. My real work was learning that I need to find what comes naturally to me, what energizes me, what am I good at, what do I enjoy. But that was messier, right? It wasn't clear cut the way it was for them. It was slower, it was excruciating, but I needed to figure out what was mine. And that's when I learned something crucial, which was I had to take myself seriously first. Because if I didn't, I was always bringing that energy into the room, and people can sense that. Like, people aren't stupid. It's so obvious how you feel about yourself from the way you dress, from the way you speak, from the way you carry yourself. And I realized no one else is going to change this for me. Like, I have to sort it out for myself. So, the incompetent version of me had a served purpose because the incompetent version, or what I told myself, she kept me humble. She kept me from being arrogant. She made me think before I spoke. She made me study like a freak in school. And she always made me go into situations fully prepared because I hated that feeling so much of feeling like I wouldn't be ready. Now I have the absolute skill that people compliment me on, that no matter what I do, I have studied and I'm prepared to go before because I know I work awful under pressure. I need to have my time. But this girl was also now keeping me from stepping into my actual capability. So that bitch had to die so that another one could live. And now I want to talk about the second version of me, which was the hyper independent me, and a lot of people can relate to this, right? And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to the incompetent one as well. We all have similar stories going on in our heads. This one, I'm still thinking it's a harder death than the first. But this one was brutal because this one I really liked. And more than liked, kept me safe, kept me very safe. And it kept me alive. And I almost, in this weird way, when I became conscious of how much this was hurting me, it was hard to get upset with me about it because I was like, but this is what makes me go into situations prepared. This is what makes me get my own things done. And also, this version was the version a lot of people praised because it was the version of me that was responsible, composed, reliable, the person who always knew where they were going, the one who my parents never had to worry about, my aunts and uncles never had to worry about. Like, I actually remember so vividly, I was visiting my mom's best friend in Rome because I decided to go to Rome for a summer alone. Hyper independence, right back at ya. And I was in college, and I literally had just spent 2 hours with this woman. She had known me a little bit as a child, but not much. Like maybe 2 times we saw each other. And she said in Italian, "Sei una ragazza in gamba." And that means you are a girl, young woman, with their head on their shoulders. It's not an exact translation, but that's essentially the best way I can translate it for you in English. Like, you have it together. You know what you're doing. And it was meant as a compliment. Absolutely. It was meant as the greatest compliment. And all that it made me feel deeply was profoundly alone. Because there was that version of me, the hyper independent Maria, the one everybody loved, the one that I was praised for, the one who didn't need anything, the one who had it all figured out, the one who never really let anyone see what she was actually feeling or struggling, and the one who people literally could see within hours of knowing me. I mean, this woman barely knew me. So this was obviously the energy I was giving off. And the thing is, on the inside, this was choking me. It was absolutely choking me. Like, this was a small moment, but it really offered me a lot. And back to the moment that I started this podcast episode on, where I really, for the first time, was like, what is my problem? Was when my best friend's mom offered to buy me a pair of shoes. Shoes. I spiraled. I didn't want her help. I didn't want her generosity. I didn't want to feel vulnerable. I didn't want her to feel like she had to buy something for me because she was buying something for my friend and she felt bad. And I will just never forget going into that dressing room and crying like a freak. And the observer side of me was like, what is happening? But whatever is happening, this matters, and you need to take notes on this. Because what happened after that was, over the next 2 years, and even now a bit, life kept throwing a lot of clues at me. Like, a lot. I'd noticed that my hyper independence was destroying my relationships. It was blocking my connections. It was making me feel like a constant burden. I couldn't receive from people. It made me to believe that I had no space anywhere. It was awful. It was awful, and sometimes when I still struggle with those thoughts, it's awful, and I know a lot of people feel this way, and essentially it made me isolate. It made me hide. It made me pretend I was fine while secretly kind of resenting people and being mad for them not checking on me, kind of, being the way I was with them, and so not, and so forth. And the thing is, but I was never letting them know anything. People aren't mind readers, like, you can't expect others to show up when you never let them see the hurt side of you or the weak side of you. And when you spend your life like me, being very praised for something that ended up being a survival strategy, put together, independent, it inevitably, without you realizing, it becomes your identity. It becomes your ego. It becomes who you are. And egos don't want to die. Identities don't want to die. Like, we are so fixated on identity. And I was actually listening to Tony Robinson talk about how dangerous identity is, and that we have got to stop seeing ourselves as one fixed thing. And yeah, the key insight I really want you to take away from this is that these versions served me. Like, even though I said earlier, I had to kill that bitch, ha ha ha. She served me. The incompetent girl in me and that inner narrative served me. I don't hate these versions. In fact, I thank them. Because at the end of the day, the law of polarity is taking the things that hurt you the most in life and using them to make you stronger. Like, these weaknesses have made me strong and sharp in other ways. And like I said, the hyper independent girl, she got me through my worst days. And this version gave me just the determination and grit to keep going. I think she still does, but now it's becoming more healthy. And it's still the girl, who has the determination to go for what she wants in life. And again, I'm really thankful for her because yeah, she helped me a lot. But now I realize, because I was consciously aware of this, that now it was blocking me of connection. And I didn't want that anymore. It was really hurting me. It was helping me. It was not helping me in being seen and having good relationships, and it needed to go. So, a version that saved me as a child was now suffocating me as an adult, and I needed to do something about it. Okay, so the moment of change. So, I said before in the previous block that life was kind of giving me all these clues, right? But there still wasn't like a moment where I hit the wall or rock bottom. And there was a moment where I wouldn't say I hit rock bottom, but I hit a wall. I had just gotten back from 4 months abroad by myself because I did that last year in 2025. Why? Because I'm a little crazy. If you want my honesty, I did a whole episode on it of spending 3 months alone in Europe, and the 4th month was basically because I took a trip every single week in August after that, even though I was still working through all of this, because August is just insane in Spain, and everybody was going on trips, and I was just joining them. But essentially, when I came back and went to my routine of being in Madrid in September, I came back not just from 4 months of being abroad, but from a year and a half of going through a lot personally with my family and with my income. And I think everything just hit me, along with these realizations of independence and being incompetent. So I felt really lonely, maybe in a way that I remember one time my brother asked me, "Don't you ever feel lonely?" It was like a few years ago, and I was like, no, really, like, I'm okay. And I meant that. And then in September, I was like, now I know what it feels to really be lonely. And yeah, I was suffocating under the weight of my own expectations, and I was angry that these two parts of myself were running the show, essentially, in strong ways. So, for the first time ever, and I don't say that with any exaggeration, I told my friends. I opened up to them about how I was doing awful, and I was so sad, and I was tired of being the Maria that had it all together all the time. And, my friends are spread out all over the world, and I basically sent all of them like very long 10-minute audio notes on WhatsApp of me rambling and crying and, again, being completely honest for the first time ever with my friends. And every single one of them was there for me. That's why, it does come to a point where you have to own your own shit, because I couldn't blame others really for keeping these internal narratives in my head. Think, here I was, I told all my friends, and what did they all do? "Maria, what do you need? Come, do you need me?" They called me, they listened, they assumed, they assured me they were there. And I think I knew subconsciously I always had such great friends that I could do that with. But, this fear of being a burden and them seeing me differently and appearing weak was stronger than the fear of being alone. But I guess now the fear of being alone and all this awfulness caught up to me. And yeah, the ones who do live in Madrid with me, we went out. I ugly cried. It was in public. And I am not one to cry in public. I think it's actually quite not the best thing to do. But, I was just so broken. And to be honest, I'm still kind of growing through this brokenness now. But I think maybe in a weird way, it was good for me to break this whole, you can't cry in public, you always need to be composed. Like, I was absolutely humiliated. But you know what? maybe I needed to feel embarrassed because it helped me feel free. And it helped me connect more with my humanity because at the end of the day, I'm a human. I don't have it all together all the time. I am finite. And in these moments where I really was so vulnerable with my friends, um, I felt really loved and seen by them. And all I had to do was ask. Like, they were there. I wasn't asking. It's hard to ask. It's hard to ask when you feel you're gonna interrupt people, but people that love you will be there. And it sounds so simple. Like, why didn't you do this before? But these are deep wounds of trauma. That's why, like, I have taken so much time in my life, I guess, to understand human behavior. And I've found myself coming to a point where I can never really be mad at any human because I get it. It's trauma, it's wounds, and so much of this we're absolutely ignorant to because it's not in our conscious. We're all just these icebergs sticking out of the water with all this crap underneath us. Anyways, so when you spend years not asking and when you're petrified of being a burden, these stories that you have, they just override your logic and you really do end up feeling absolutely isolated. And that's where I was. And what was so hard about, again, killing these versions of me is that these versions so deeply took care of me. They got me through my worst days. Again, being hyper independent has given me a lot of determination and grit. So it just felt hard having to like be angry about it because it almost felt like, how can you be angry? I kept you alive. Like, don't betray me. It felt like a betrayal. But what I had to learn was that reality is hard and it's easier to live in delusion, but I knew that if I wanted to move forward and stop having all these feelings of hiding, that I needed to have deeper, more meaningful connections with the people in my life and feel seen. I actually read such a beautiful essay on feeling seen, and I'm going to make sure to upload it at the bottom of this episode. Anyways, these versions of me had to go though, because now that I was consciously aware of how much pain they were causing me, ciao, arrivederci, non ti voglio nella mia vita. Okay, so there's beauty in needing people. That's what I really sorted out, and I'm still on my way to believe that, but it's true. Logically I know it's true, but I'm still figuring out how to make it feel more emotionally true. And something else I'm realizing is that it's also a strength to receive because it's absolutely ludicrous to think that you're never going to need help. Like, yeah, okay. Okay. And the paradox is this, which is I had to grieve this version while I was still becoming someone new. And I think I'm still going through it a bit. And this is very messy. Nobody really talks about this. This is a very different type of grief than someone dying. And you don't kill these versions right away. You don't immediately feel amazing. You feel loss. You feel grief. You feel emptiness. It's like a wave you keep on riding for a very long time, and only with time and over time does the wave not come crashing as high and as strong, and they keep becoming lower and lower and easier to ride from an emotional point of view. And the thing is, though, that underneath all this emptiness is pain, there's freedom. There's freedom. And it's worth it. It's so worth it. We're made to be on this planet to connect with people. We need it. There's so many studies that back this up. I will not be including them here. You can look them up yourself. And yeah, that's my story. These are two versions of myself I had to work through. Two deaths that happened because I had to change. I wanted to be better. And what I know is that you have your own versions. We all do. I still have versions I'm probably going to discover. And you have your own deaths waiting to happen. And the question is, are you ready? Because let me tell you, the process is real. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of vulnerability. It takes asking for help. And I think most of all, it takes being tired with your pain for you to move quick enough. And now let's get into the practical steps. So, here is the story. Here are the practical blocks because my biggest thing about this episode is I want to tell you a truth. I want to tell you a story about it, and then I want to give you actionable steps that you can implement into your life. And maybe you heard all this and you're thinking, okay, but how do I actually do this, you know? And how do I kill this version of myself that has kept me alive? Hopefully that's what you're asking, and I hope it is because that's the right question. And what I learned is that you can't absolutely force this death. I think you need to start out with recognizing when something served its time, right? Like that, these parts of me served their time, honoring what they did, and then being willing to grieve it and really feeling that grief and then build something new. And I think the part I am in right now is still allowing myself to feel the grief. So yeah, let me tell you my 5 steps. I don't think they're really that complicated. But yeah, so step 1, and I will reiterate this and die on a hill about it, you have to become fully done. You have to not just be irritated or not kind of aware that something's off or not slightly annoyed. No, done. Done. Sick of it. Tired of the pain. The pain is the worst pain ever. You don't want to feel it anymore. Finished. Complete. Fin. Fin. If you don't get to this point where you're sick of it, it's probably not going to change. And again, this is also different from deciding to just change because you can decide to change and still be holding on to like the old version while reaching for the other. No. Finality. Finality, because the pain of staying the same and this version continuing to hurt you has to be stronger than the pain of change. This is how we move as human beings. It's just how we are. It's just how we are. And where you see clearly, without judgment, without shame, but with complete clarity, that this version of you is not serving you anymore, that's when you change. That this version is blocking you from connection, from softness, from love, from the life you want to be living, from how you want to be feeling. And also acknowledging, though, like I said in the beginning, that it saved you, that it did something for you, that it kept you alive, but now it's time to let it go. You know, being angry with yourself also, it doesn't get you anywhere. Like, these things are a mix of a lot of reasons. They're a mix of your childhood. They're a mix of people. They're a mix of you telling yourself this internal story, right? Like, there's really just not one person or situation you can absolutely pinpoint. So yeah, without this moment of internal finality, to me, change just won't happen. You'll cycle right back. So the question is, what version of you are you done with? And what part of yourself can you see is no longer serving you? You don't need to rush this. Just sit with it and think on it. And yeah. Step 2, pay attention to your emotions because they're clues. They're context clues. Now, here's what I don't mean. I also don't mean that your emotions are absolutely factual, because they're not. You can feel like a failure without actually being one. You can feel like no one cares about you, but that's actually not true, right? But emotions, I don't think are ever random. They point to where you are wounded. So when you feel a spiral coming or emotions rising up and your logic is like, whoa, what's happening? And this happens a lot when we get defensive, when we react a lot, or we're just suddenly exhausted. Like, these little triggers, they are data. And that's your nervous system and your body saying, hey, something I care about is being threatened. Really pay attention to how your body reacts to, and more of like, is your body in an intense state? Is it not? I heard a quote, I forget who said it now, but basically she was saying you can tell to the extent of how much something traumatizes you or upsets you or gets you emotionally reacted by your physiological state. If your physiological state is your heart beating, you're getting sweaty, now you're feeling anxious, your stomach is dropping, pay attention to that. That is telling you something. And I know right now we're living through this whole nervous system thing, Oh my gosh, that makes me think there's another really great essay I can link. I'm gonna write that down. And it was super simple, but she was like, I'm so tired of everybody saying, listen to my nervous system. Because I was feeling the exact same way. And I read her essay and it was really helpful. So, yeah, essentially, I do think it does have a lot to do with our nervous system. But essentially, these reactions, these defenses, blah, 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 these are the old versions of us that wanted to survive. And when that version feels threatened, it sends up signals. And those signals are AKA your emociones. So, your job is to notice those signals cognitively when they happen. Write them down, do an audio note in your notes app. Do it because then you're going to forget. Journal, whatever. Doesn't matter how, just get it out of your head and put it on something external. Name what you're feeling and then return to it later and connect the dots because you're also going to probably react at the same things at a different occurrence. So, if you don't do this, I think you're just left with a lot of random moments in life of crying and jumbled up thoughts and never really understanding what's going on. But if you're intentional, I think we can get there. All right. Step número tres. Ask for help. A friend, a mentor, a parent, a therapist, your pastor. I don't care. Ask. But make sure it's someone who you know wants the best for you and cares about your future. And that will listen to your emotions and will not get defensive and will not judge you. Tell them how you feel. And the thing is, they're going to be able to see things that you can't. And they're going to be able to give you more context. They're going to be able to ground you. I was so afraid of doing this. Oh, can I tell you how afraid I was? I still get a little bit nauseous at the thought of telling people my most vulnerable thoughts. But asking for help meant admitting I didn't have it all figured out and there's no way I could. It just meant being vulnerable. It meant losing perhaps the Maria everybody praised and said was so strong. But that's what needed to happen because things needed to change. And my friends became mirrors for me. Other people became mirrors for me. I won't name anyone. And a lot of people were just, again, able to see patterns that I couldn't. And they could tell me this with love. You know, they could say, we're here, we know you're hurting, you don't have to do this alone. And, you know, that permission to not be alone was what I really needed to let this hyper-independence version of me go. So, who is someone that could tell you the truth? And who is someone that is safe? I promise you have at least one person that can do that in your life. Step 4, expose yourself to fear in microdoses. Now, this is called the hormesis effect. I first heard of this in a book that I read called Becoming Bulletproof. Loved it, by Evie Pompereus, something like that. And it's a fancy way of saying this. Take tiny intentional stress. Oh, sorry. It's a fancy way of saying tiny intentional stress teaches your body that it can handle it. Tiny intentional stress teaches your body that it can handle it. So you don't need to be brave at once. You need to do small steps that are tiny and intentional because those little exposures of stress are going to help your body know you can do it. So let your nervous system learn that vulnerability isn't fatal, that asking for help doesn't destroy you, that being seen doesn't end you. Start so small that it feels stupid, truly. It can be a conversation. It can be one job submission, one ask for help throughout for the duration being 2 weeks. I remember Jordan Peterson saying, because he's a therapist, he was saying that this one client he told him, just start by vacuuming your room. That's it. That's all you need to do this week, and then we'll talk next week. That's all you need. Like, that's how little it can be. And I also asked ChatGPT, I know this is a Gen Z move, so don't take anything I say super seriously. And as I always say on my podcast, be a free thinker. So please don't take what I always say at face value. But I told it all my fears, and then I told it, okay, now help me do this effect and help me break it all down in actionable steps. And it worked. I loved it. It was so helpful. And the point is, you need to realize that you're not in a war, right? That these versions helped keep something alive in you. They helped you. But now you're trying to gently get out of that. Now you're safe. The threat has passed. You're the adult taking care of yourself. It's okay to change. Your nervous system is a part of you, so treat it with respect. And lastly, step 5, be patient with the death. You do not have to kill this version in one day. In fact, again, that would be ludicrous. These old versions, they really don't disappear overnight. They unravel slowly. You're going to have more context clues. I first noticed the first incompetent person story almost 3 years ago. Like, that was my first context clue. And my hyper independence journey, like, two. So, yeah, it takes tiempo, my friends. And patience with yourself really looks like just notice your reactions, let that one person in, ask for help, have that moment, and take those intentional micro steps because they count, those steps, because they're proof to yourself that you can survive this. And that new version of you, the one who can receive, who can ask for help, who can be vulnerable, who can stay in your own power while also being soft, is absolutely possible. And once you know it's possible, you really can keep going. And I think the antidote to a lot of suffering is action. Okay, so we've talked about the why, we've talked about the how. Now let's talk about what you're actually going to do just today, because I do like to give an action step. Just today, just tonight, just while you're listening to this. And I want you to do this in 3 parts. It'll take about 10 minutes. And part 1 is name one version of you that saved you as a child but is keeping you stuck as an adult. What version are you tired of being? What part of yourself can you feel is no longer serving you? So, what is this version? Name it and write it down. That's it. Part 2. Now write another 2 things down. Why did this version serve you? And why does it need to go now? This is important because you can't kill something without, I think, appreciating what it did before. Again, you don't want to hate yourself. It saved you, it helped you, that matters. But now you want to keep going on. And identify one person you could tell the truth to. Maybe not today, not yet, but just identify them. And then write a voice note to yourself about what you just realized and sit with it. And for the next 2 days, don't push, just notice what comes up. This isn't a massive overhaul. I think this is just becoming aware in a small way. It's being honest, and this is where work begins. And by the end of this week, progress doesn't look like a completely new personality, right? Like, this is impossible. You got to take your time. Progress can look like you named the version that you don't like and you feel is keeping you stuck. You honored what it did for you. You admitted to yourself that it's no longer serving you, and you felt the weight of that truth. That's it. That's the win. That's how small it can be. And then you have to go from there because you're your own person, you're smart, and you can figure it out. And by doing this, you just prove to yourself that you can be honest about who you're becoming. And that's everything. And the real thing is that, a version that saved you as a child unfortunately can suffocate you as an adult. And it's not betrayal, it's not failure, it's just evolution. Like, this is all good things. And evolution can sometimes be the worst death, but also the most worth it one. So, as I always say on my podcast, stay in the driver's seat because you're the driver of your life. Keep it coming. Be excited about who you're becoming. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed